Hey YouTube, it's Kel. How are you tonight? I just thought I would pop on and do a semi-quick video, another psychoeducational one. And this one is going to be on the topic of what's called splitting in therapy or psychotherapy, psychology. And I will explain what that means. And I also wanted to do it for two different reasons. One, it can be applied on an individual basis. And also, I feel like it's also relevant on a societal level right now. So I just wanted to kind of psychoeducate people on what it is, because I remember when I was, super young, I think a lot of people have a certain level of this. You don't have to be, it kind of can be on a spectrum, this trait. And so you can have it very extreme, or you can have just like a little bit of it. But even if you have a little bit of it, it's very good for you to notice, because it just, once you correct it, it like helps you see things, I feel like, in a more balanced, objective way. So, okay, so let's talk about what it is. First of all, it's called splitting again. It is a factor in what is called object relations theory in psychology. And I think maybe you remember from a previous video, but I talked about how if you have psychology as an umbrella, you have lots of different subgenres and lots of different theories in psychology that talk about how does an individual, see the world, how do they heal, wounds in them and whatnot. So every theory kind of looks at that differently. Cognitive behavioral therapy looks at it through like your thoughts affect your behaviors, and well, I could go into each different one. I probably will throughout the course of doing this podcast, but this particular one that we're going to talk about tonight is called object relations. And I won't even go into really the whole detail of object relations theory, but essentially does talk about your attachment to your primary object caretaker or attachment figure. So a lot of you guys have heard of attachment theory. This is in that realm. So, but what we're going to talk about tonight is again, another subgenre of that theory, or a little trait within that theory, object relations theory, and it's called splitting. And I feel like it's particularly important because, again, once you see it, you kind of can't unsee it. And a lot of people have probably never thought about it. I know, again, until I was in graduate school, I had never heard of it. I'd never thought about it. I'd never thought about it within myself. So, essentially what splitting is, let me explain. First of all, it's a habit of looking at people with an all good, all bad split. Okay, so that's where the word splitting comes from, is that you have a split between some people in your life are all good. And so you see them as like an angel. Oh my gosh, they're perfect. They can't do any wrong. They're so great. They, you just hold them on this pedestal. Or they are, quote, all bad. So they are the devil. They are the worst. They can't do anything right. They're just the most evil, right? So people who have this good bad split, basically, they have a very hard time integrating good and bad together. So now we'll get into it, but basically, as you all know logically, as rational human beings, we can understand we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. We all have things we do well, and we all have flaws. We all have things we're great at. We all have imperfections, right? And so, and even if you want to look at it as like good and evil, the good, yin and the yang, we all have good and evil. There isn't, in my opinion, except for my personal belief in Jesus, there wasn't one amongst us who is all good, right? So we all have, and then we can get it. I'm going to get into the shadow side another time, but like we all have our good sides and our, whatever you want to call it, evil, shadow sides, whatever. So, but we are all an integration of those. And the more we can accept our shadow sides or our evil sides or our imperfections, whatever you want to call them, the healthier we're going to be, because we're giving ourselves radical acceptance. Even if we, one of the phrases that I absolutely love is strive for the ideal, accept the real. So The real side of it is that we're all flawed, imperfect human beings, right? Now we can strive to do better, but we need to accept that we're all flawed. We're all good and bad. So there is no one amongst us, you know, who is perfect. There is no one, in my opinion, there is no one amongst us who is 100% evil either, right? So as much as people want to villainize certain people, it's like, no, we are all a mix of good and bad. So where you might go is like, okay, well, how does this split? Because what it is a cognitive distortion. And I'm going to do, again, another video at another time about cognitive distortions, but this is one where it's a cognitive distortion, and people might say, well, how does this develop in people? So I'm going to explain that to you. So basically what happens is in some people with their caregivers growing up, if while they are growing up, one of their caretakers has more, say, quote, negative traits than positive traits, this split can develop. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we all as children have an instinct to want to see our parents in a better good than bad light, because we want to see them, we are dependent on them to take care of us, right? So we have to, for our own cognitive, our own peace of mind, our own cognitive structuring, we have to see them as better or more good than bad, because they're going to feed us. You know, we can't go out and fend for ourselves, especially in this current society. Well, just ever. Kids cannot do that. So they have to find a way to see their parents in more good than bad. Okay. And so a lot of times, and I saw this a lot when I used to work at, with abused children who had ended up in group homes. And you would see this split very strongly, where they would always idealize their parents to how amazing they were so good, and like they would not talk about the bad in their parents at all, because a lot of times they had this split of, if they would have accepted, it became a defense mechanism where if they would have accepted the bad, you know, they would have realized how vulnerable they are to the inconsistency of their parents, to the unreliability, to the chaos, to, you know, whatever it was, how, and let's just be honest, like some of their parents didn't care, you know, didn't provide for them as well as they should have, right? So, and again, I'm not blaming bad parents. Again, this is not about blame. It's just, how do these things develop? When the negatives outweigh the positives, or even when just if you've gone through trauma, or if you've gone through neglect or any kind of abuse, like if your parents physically were excessively abusive with you, and yet you don't, it's a defense mechanism. You don't want to see it. You know, you didn't want to see it then. You definitely didn't want to see it then. You still, as an adult, likely don't want to see it. And so what happens is the splitting happens where you overcompensate to they are all good. So you kind of dismiss the bad, and you just go into like, well, I have to just believe they're all good, because I can't even acknowledge the bad, because I just have to go into like self-protective mode that they're good, they're going to take care of me, I can't acknowledge the bad. So splitting typically happens if the negative in one parent outweighs or is more traumatic than the good bonding that happens in that one parent. And so now it doesn't always happen, but it just can happen as a defense mechanism. And so how does that end up manifesting in adult relationships? This is when you will see people who go into their adult relationships and either think that their partner, their romantic partner, is the best person in the world, a saint, a total saint, and can't do anything wrong. So a lot of times where how you can spot this is until that person hurts them. And then all of a sudden they are thrown into you are the devil. How could you do this to me? I can't allow any imperfections in you. So therefore you're just the worst ever. And you meant to do that. And you're evil. And you're, I won't use the words, but the names. But, so they go from like you were amazing to you're just the worst and I'm going to attribute all these bad characteristics to you. Instead of, right, like you are a good person, but you have some flaws. So when you hurt me, I'm going to see that we are all flawed and like just share my feelings with you and we can talk about it. And so I can understand where was that coming from. And so, so basically you understand. So it's kind of like, again, all good, all bad split. So there is no, when you have this, it's called the all good, all bad split. When you have it, you have a very difficult time looking at both other people as all good and all bad. And here's the kicker too. You have a hard time viewing yourself as all good and all bad, or I mean, as some good and some bad, right? So you have a hard time integrating that you are a mixture of good and bad. You may have a hard time accepting your own weaknesses, your own drawbacks, your own, like challenges or imperfections. You may have a hard time accepting that. So this is how you can kind of tell. And again, this is a spectrum trait. So like it's not like you either have it or you don't. You can have it to the extreme. I have seen clients, holy cow, I've seen clients, and I'm not trying to be judgmental, but I've definitely seen clients with it at a like 10 out of 10 level. And then I've seen clients with like, where it's like a 2 out of 10, where it's not like it's not definitely impairing their life in any real way, but it also is something good for them to notice, like, how quickly they may want to just assign someone to the bad category, So, okay, so that is how it plays out individually, which I just think is important for you to know. Now, my point in this is not to judge people who have this trait. Again, it's a product of trauma typically. And so therefore I definitely am not judging anybody who has this. I actually have a lot of compassion for anybody who has this trait, because typically you developed it as a result of some kind of trauma or neglect or abuse or something, or just, lack of attention or whatever it was. But so there is zero judgment on this. My point in doing this video is to just, if you have that, bring it to your awareness and know that your life will probably be a little more enjoyable if you can tolerate the good and the bad in other people. So that is one thing. Now, the other way I find that this plays out, and this kind of goes back to my very first video, is societally. Right now, I do feel like we are in such a place now. I have been guilty of it too. And I feel like I, for a minute or for a while, was kind of like radicalized to think one side is better than another. But I'm very much like, I feel like full circle on that, where I'm like, no, we are all imperfect and we all have great strengths and we're all amazing human beings, but we all have flaws. So, but my point is that societally right now, we very much are in a place of like, oh, that side's good and this side is bad, And so it's very much a good bad split, right? Like assuming, and it's just so logically flawed, because as we all know, in any group of people, there are probably, great people who have fewer flaws or whatever. And then there's like worse people who have, more flaws, but but they still have good in them, So we all, in every group, there's a gamut of like morality. There's a gamut of good versus evil in every single group, in every single ethnicity, in every single nation, in every single Democratic Party, or like political party, not even Democratic Party, but like political party, right? And yet somehow, and I do believe it's the sensationalism, like society, like a soundbite society that we're living in. Somehow we have just like got it in our minds that like one side is right and one side is wrong. And typically the bigger the issue, the more complexity the issue, the more nuance, the more, the more wrong that perspective is that one side is right, right? So, you see the good bad split whenever you want to make one group all good and one group all bad, or even again one person all good and one person all bad, right? All of that is flawed thinking. We are all good and bad. We all have good and bad in us. Now, could you make the argument that some people have more good in them and some people have more bad in them? Now, You could possibly make that argument. Am I interested in making that argument? No, I'm not. Do you know why? Because I am not God. I'm not, whatever you believe in, higher power, whoever you believe in. It is not my job to judge the goodness and the badness in the entirety of a human being. Like, I do not believe that any of us have the omniscience to judge in that capacity, that we fully know someone's heart, to be able to say, you know what, you're X amount good and you're X amount bad. I don't care what the behaviors have been. We do not know their history. We do not know their genetics. We don't know their psychoanalysis. We don't know what happened to them when they were young, So my point is that we are so quick to be extreme in our thinking in good versus bad. And we all need to take a chill pill on that. I haven't heard or used that phrase in decades. But anyways, my point is it's a cognitive distortion. It is flawed thinking. It is 99.9% of the time it is wrong. If you try to say all good, all bad, or this side is even right, or this side is wrong. And have I been guilty of it? Absolutely. Let me throw that out there. I am saying this as someone who, when you start to become aware of this, you're like, I did that with that, and I did it then, and so it's kind of one of those things you're like, ooh, but it's, I feel like super helpful to be aware of, because just like a lot of cognitive distortions, I'm going to go into them in the future, but another example of a cognitive distortion that we'll get into in another time is using words like always or never. Because again, 98% of the time, always and never are typically wrong. So that's going to be, again, you start to see how often do I use that? So it's just food for thought, but tonight we were just going to talk about splitting, and especially because we are living in an era of so quickly wanting to jump on that tribal bandwagon of you are good, you're the good team, and you're the bad team. It is just becoming so ridiculous. Now again, was I guilty of it for a minute? Yes, I was. I feel like I was radicalized, and I'm not going to blame anybody. I just feel like I'm going to psychoanalyze myself for a sec. There was a time I felt so powerless in my life, and that made me angry because I just I wanted to do something. And so therefore I felt like I had to channel that towards one side or the other. And again, this is all flawed thinking, but I'm just explaining, and what did I end up? I ended up trying to put some of that into action. But my point is that when we are feeling powerless, we are even more susceptible, I think, to get angry from the powerlessness, and then also blame it on one side or another, So anyways, this is just my quick psychoeducational lesson on splitting and the all good, all bad fallacy, or the all good, all bad distortion, cognitive distortion. And I thought I would just hop on and let you know, because if you were anything like me, you probably didn't know that existed, but once you see it, you'll be like, oh, kind of see it everywhere. So anyways, I hope that you are doing well tonight, and I'm sending love and hugs, and I will see you next time.